Hi and welcome to Dynamics Update. Today we're back, me and Gustav. Hello, Gustav.
Hi, Johan. How are you this evening?
I'm great, thank you. And today it's one of those regular episodes where we talk about release updates. And what I noted today was that it's really far between them. It used to be that we almost have every episode as a release notes episode, but now they are an eternity apart, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, it started out as a release episode, but then when Microsoft and all the glory decided to change a little bit in the cadence of how often we do releases, we had to find other things to fill the agenda, so to speak. But now it's kind of nice, it takes a little while, and then you get to spend even more time reading up on the features and also trying some of them out. And it's, I mean, in the pace we are seeing innovation today. Not only in Dynamics, but especially in the AI area, it's very important to sometimes to just sit down, read the notes, read the documentation, and kind of understand what is actually happening.
Yes, I think so too. So let's get started. I'll start this time, I think.
Sure.
We have a feature on the electronic reporting side, which has to do with. I mean, we've been doing SMTP mail for like ages now,
Yeah.
and finally we now get the BCC as an option to Dynamics. So now we can actually send electronic reporting emails without revealing all of the destinations. We can send them to multiple destinations, and the destinations won't know that the other has gotten it as well because we have BCC.
Nice little feature in ER, and hopefully everyone is using the Graph connector now for email, for outbound email. We'll see. Okay, so my next one, or my first one actually for tonight, is related to bank reconciliation. It's a little feature, but I think it will help a lot. It's enabling the in operator for one-to-one matching in matching rules, basically for bank reconciliation. It only applies to one-to-one matching scenarios, but it can help a lot if you have a lot of rules where you have to specify multiple rules saying equal this, equal this, equal this, but it's all going towards the same account basically. Then you can simplify your rule set with the in operator. So it's a nice little thing, but it will help you out with setting up your rules.
Yep. My next one is a supply chain one, which has to do with product lifecycle state. The reason why I took that one is because we have a customer where we actually are discussing product lifecycle at the moment in a dual rights scenario. And one of the things that I thought was interesting here was that before, when you had product lifecycle state, you had to turn on a feature, or actually a license key, because it's not in the feature management, it's in the license keys, called engineering change management. And I mean, that you could see that as a small thing, but I think that the reason why I want to bring it up is that I would like to have the discussion here as well on what it actually means to enable a license key, because it isn't just turning on a UI element and a new menu and being able to like use new functionality, because what it actually does, it does a lot of things underneath. It adds columns and tables. It removes columns and tables if you remove it. So understanding the implications of turning it on or off is actually quite important. I mean, I've been arguing for years that it's probably a good idea to keep the license keys set up in the same way that they were out of the box. Because, I mean, if you look at how Microsoft tests F&O, they don't test it with every single permutation of the license keys. So if you want to take advantage of the fact that they have actually tested the application, keeping the license keys in the same setup as original is probably a good thing, because otherwise you will have to figure out what is not in the same way as testing. And we mentioned one of those before we started recording today, and that is the call center one. We just talked about like a year ago or so that we got a new pricing engine. And the thing is that one of the prerequisites for unified pricing is actually that you enable call center, which is something that most customers might have turned off, because it's like, we don't have a call center, so why should we have it turned on?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, just looking at that particular license key changes a lot of the logic in retail, and it varies, of course, with license keys. It's, as you say, probably license keys is a technical debt, you could argue, from the AX days, where that's how you actually turned on, and it had connections to what you paid for, and it also had connections to like actual usage in the system, which, well, it does kind of now, but now with the feature management, it can be kind of confusing, right? What is a license key and what is a feature manager? In essence, they both control the same thing, logic of how the system is operating. So, I mean, and it's hard as well here to be binary and say, okay, you should always turn this off, always turn this off. If you can see with your own eyes or performance test that turning off a specific license key, let's say budget or whatever, I think people claim that can be a performance gain. If you can prove it and you have tests, you're sure your test coverage is good, go ahead, like turn it off. We're not saying that it's a bad thing as long as you can prove it. It's just it's important to be aware of what you are turning off or on in that regard when you're using license keys. It's much the same way as features, even though features can be much, much smaller and have less impact than an actual license key in this regard.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, I argue that if you turn one on or if you turn one off, you should basically almost have to like retest the entire system, because as we all know, there are an unhealthy amount of dependencies in F&O. So just making sure that it's well tested again. I mean, I have one of these tiny anecdotes from one of my customers. They had turned off a little tiny license key called CDS integration. And that basically means that you can't run dual writes or anything else that has to do with a Power Platform.
Yeah, kind of a deal breaker in many cases.
Sort of, yes.
Yeah. No, and I mean, you said testing the entire system. While that is true, it's also like it depends on the license key, of course. And if you actually nowadays you have MCP servers with X++, like it's never been easier to kind of actually analyze all the code that you're using, all the telemetry, all the endpoints that you are using, and figure out where you might have touched things, like by turning on and off a license key. But if you don't have that capability or you don't know how to do that, just what you take from this conversation or this podcast is to just be very mindful when turning on or off license keys, and try to not do it really if you stick with the out-of-box ones, unless you can prove with tests that this gives you a performance gain or gives you a gain in some regard, right?
I mean, regardless, if we do it or we don't, it's a really, really good case for automated testing cases
definitely.
Anyway.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yes, so let's get back to you.
All right, so a little bit of a sidetrack. I had there are many nice features now coming for, and this is actually, I have to say, a preview feature. So it's from supply chain management. It's the warehouse spatial. I think it's called spatial or spatial. I'm not sure about that one. Not being a non-English native speaker. Warehouse spatial location overview, and what it is basically exactly what it sounds like. It provides you with XYZ coordinates on your picking locations. And then there's a whole Learn article here with the different algorithms that you can use. But instead of sorting it you can be very advanced here. But normally you have a sort order, right? So you build your pick routes in the most efficient manner depending on your warehouse, and it's alphabetically sorted or numerical sorted. You can be very creative here, right? But what this will do is calculate either dynamically, like per picking route, or you can pre-calculate and you can set like predefined routes based on actual distance. So it's going to do a distance calculation, and then it has distance calculation strategies and sorting algorithms. So, I mean, this is really something where it's either a perfect match for your setup or it's too advanced and it's not necessary. So that's really up to you. But I think it's really cool because then you can, if you have a lot of different warehouses, it's hard for you to actually, you can't have the same like strategy for every warehouse or every branch or whatever. But you're picking you have shelves, right? They normally look kind of the same. So what you need to do is really have just a good understanding of how your particular warehouse looks, configure it, and then basically there's a lot of configuration that goes into here with sorting algorithms. Either you can have it, if it's not super critical for it to be the fastest one every time, but you can calculate it on the fly, or you can set up a lot of different optimizations of routes here, where you can actually store them, and then there's a whole lot of math here as well. So everyone wanting to really nerd themselves down here, which I know a lot of supply chain consultants do or users do, just go to the Learn article on spatial location overview and have a look. Note that it is in preview, so it's I don't have a date when it will be in GA at this point, but try it out. I think it looks really cool.
Yes. So my next one is also a supply chain one. And to get some background here, when we started using F&O and we started talking about source control and we had build pipelines and we have Visual Studio and everything, the main argument I got was that this is going to be so slow. It's going to take so much time to deploy things to production. And I still, to this day, argue that that's a feature and not a bug, that we can actually think things through before we actually put them in production, which I think is a good thing. But with that said, some things actually needs to be a bit quicker. And I mean, we have certain examples of that. We can do our runnable classes, which I know that me and Gustav argue about.
Yeah, don't do it.
And then we and don't do it if you don't have to. And then we have the electronic reporting stuff, which is also sort of a bit tighter. It's a bit easier to get things into production with electronic reporting. And then we have a lot of ISVs for document management, which also is an argument for using an ISV for output management, is actually that the development lifecycle, the testing and reviewing and feedback is quicker when you do it that way. But what we now get is actually, when it comes to dynamic work classification, before we had to build that from code, so X++ code that was built by a developer and deployed by a developer. Now we can actually build these structures in PowerFX, which is the language which was introduced in Power Platform, like what was it, 3-4 years ago, something like that, I think.
Maybe longer.
So it's sort of Excel-ish in the way it looks, and it's actually, you can actually build it from the UI.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do a deploy.
That's really cool, and I think this is one of the this is definitely an area. So basically, it can replace location directives. It can do a lot of the heavy lifting that was previously tied to locations, features such as location directive and directive codes and so forth. So it's basically, and here I can really, if I look in my crystal ball, I can see a lot of people using Copilot to help out with the generation of these PowerFX. Well, we're gonna call it code, or could we call it like formulas? So what do we call them? They have, I mean, we have. It's a narrow line, right? So if you can make it really complicated, and then I would argue that it's actually code. But it's a statement or something that you can paste into the setup here, and then it will handle the prioritization of your warehouse work, basically. So you can have a lot of overrides, basically saying that the beta or the staging should be handled this way. You can have a work class override. So you can leverage all of the setup in supply chain management with work classes and work pools and so forth, but you can handle the logic in how the system resolves this into actual work and prioritizes the work using PowerFX.
Yes.
So it seems like a really powerful tool.
Yes, I haven't had a chance to look at it, but my only fear here is configuration drift. That we do something in one environment which we don't fully push to production, meaning that we have different environments on different versions of this PowerFX code.
Yeah. So, but Johan, that is what agents will solve for us, right?
Absolutely.
As long as there's an entity here or something which we can access, then you could do that. But that's a really interesting thought. Maybe we should do a separate podcast on this, like the configuration as code. I know there's a lot of configuration. Vibe config was really cool. So there's a whole new toolbox here of doing configuration, both from a comparison standpoint, but we should really get this into what you mentioned before, Johan, the ERP, timeline where we do not like, I don't want to vibe config something in production over the weekend, but you can save a lot of time in comparisons and configuration deployments using those tools, I would say, as long as they're also tied then into the classic, you could argue, boring ERP lifecycle where it kind of goes a little bit slow, at least for analysis purposes.
Yeah, and I mean, I would argue that in some cases we can actually get a better and more robust setup using these, because we need to put them into a document format that we can actually version control, which we haven't ever done with configuration before. So I would argue that in some cases, if we are a bit strict about this, we can actually get a better and more rigid framework for this.
Yeah.
If we use agent and MCP instead of doing everything by hand.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree completely. Just the thing, having a good skill here, or some kind of level of deterministic output, at least, is what you want here, definitely. And I think that's why ERP in the way of MCP and agents is so cool for me, because then we already have the entities, we have the templates, we have a lot of the structure in place that makes the actual agent work less guessworky than it could otherwise have been.
Yep.
You can use the metadata to find all the parameter tables, for instance. You can use the metadata to find the module and so forth. So it gives us a lot of answers to what data we need to actually work on here. But now we kind of drifted away from the from the warehouse component here. But this is a really cool feature. But one thing worth mentioning is that this is the tricky one where it's production ready preview, I think, isn't it? Yeah. So do you know the difference here, Johan, between production ready preview and preview? Is it kind of an SLA thing?
I think it's supported, but it's not like it will have updates, it will have iterations. It's not really done, but it's supported.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that you could call Microsoft support, and if you have issues on this, because otherwise it would be like a bit stupid. But also, it's one of these features that I think should be fairly safe to use, because it's like very easy to test. It's basically instant. You can see if it's good or bad.
Exactly, and maybe it's as easy as just falling back. If you're using this, you probably already have set up location directives, right? You already have a working setup, or you're in the middle of an implementation project, in which case you still have time to evaluate this anyway, right? So try it out. I think it looks, there is a link to the supplemental terms of use. Maybe we can use an agent to summarize those for us for the difference here between preview or what it is. But yeah, it's a cool thing.
Yep. So back to you, Gustav.
Oh, it's my turn. So going into my favorite weapon of choice, commerce, then. We discussed this previously. I think it was on the last release show, the cross-legal entity inventory on hand lookup. Now we have the cross-legal entity order fulfillment kind of closing off the loop, so to speak, which is great, because there is a lot of intercompany setups with in the commerce scenarios where you have pools. Commerce across multiple legal entities for a million different reasons. There can be franchising reasons. There can be, a lot of different reasons why you would have similar companies, same products, same prices, same everything. It's just the legal structure is different, so it has to reside in a different legal entity. So from a customer point of view, or from a setup point of view, it's identical companies, just a different organizational number. And you have to then handle, if you have a central warehousing company, for instance, you have to handle intercompany orders, and that has been kind of a pain point for POS. But now, using the fulfillment groups, you could define cross-legal entity fulfillment groups. Access inventory was already part of the previous release, and then you can automate the intercompany order creations and so forth. So this really closes, but at least brings the gap closer when it comes to intercompany POS sales. So really cool feature. I haven't had a chance to try it out live yet, but I will.
Yep. So my next one is also a commerce one, which was sort of cool because, I mean, there is a fairly rigid structure around payment terminals and stuff. And I thought this was just interesting that there is a feature now coming which will actually let you change payment terminals mid-transaction. So if you have one of these portable terminals which are battery powered, and the battery runs out, and you have a customer waiting to pay, then you can actually just dynamically switch over to another payment terminal, which is charged, and then you do your payment, and then you're done. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, nice little thing, and it's something you would expect in the store, right? You wouldn't expect someone to just, no, sorry, I can't take your purchase right now. So that's a nice little thing to have in your commerce setup. But that basically, you would need to have a mobile device then running around, most likely, or that would be the scenario where you would need to switch it, most likely.
I mean, I would say like in like a scenario where you have like mobile salespeople. I mean, think restaurant-ish.
Yeah,
sort
exactly.
of, where you have a payment terminal.
Yeah.
So
exactly that. Very nice. Yep. So another commerce thing here, and this is the contextual switching of POS with external apps. So what this is, like shortly, it's basically we already have the possibility to open up an external URL from POS, right? You can add a button, it pops up a window. You can have it's being used for a multitude of different things, like member clubs. You can have external catalog systems for getting more item information and so forth, external suppliers. There's a number of reasons why you would need to open up a URL, but it's up to this point, it's just been a URL. So it's basically just the browser window pops up. It's helpful, but it's not giving you anything back to POS unless you build an integration from that system into POS, doing a recall order or whatever. So what this is basically that you open up the application, the URL, you would then pass some parameters into that application, specifying that you're coming from this POS and so forth. If you then configure or develop the external application, so it closes, that application can then pass back context to POS from the browser session, basically. So you can get product information, customer information, transaction context without, and you could argue here, you still need development most likely, but you don't need to build an integration. So you don't need to send the order from the external system. You can, one example that comes to mind, which I know is a real scenario, is that you have like external catalog systems that have more information about which product you're actually after, right? So maybe the commerce search isn't enough, or maybe Dynamics doesn't have all that information that you would need to find the item that the customer is actually after here. So you might have an external system doing that, and you would then need to have an integration from either getting the order, you can do a recall order, which works, that's fine. But if all you're after is just getting the product information, then doing it this way might like decrease the amount of development that you need, as long as it's an online application. Again, it's something I haven't had a chance to try out, but this is something I definitely will test, because it's the less integrations we need to have, I think the better, as long as this works.
That's really cool. Yeah. So I thought we'd end this episode off with a couple of new MCP functionality items. One of the things that they have added to the ERP MCP now is actually attachment support. Before, we could use like the regular UI, but we didn't have access to the attachments, which were part of the that were in the storage pool.
Yeah.
So what the ERP MCP can do now, it can read the attachments, it can create new attachments, modify them, and delete them in F&O. So just the same way you can do from the UI.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a lot of context, because a lot of these objects, I mean, you know as well, Johan, that a lot of things can have attachments, especially sales orders, purchase orders. There can be a ton of attachments on a lot of these, both on the transactions and on customers and products and so forth. There can be a ton of very, very important context-wise. You can have product data sheets and stuff like that. Normally, I mean, the agent will be capable of reading that document, but now it can actually also fetch it. So that's really cool. There were more MCP supports, right? Deep links, you mentioned there were also the data tools for SQL, which are in the release notes. It's as a feature enhancement, but So this will improve the performance for the data tools by leveraging SQL access for the read operations. But
yes, and the thing is that it's even more important than that, because what it also does is that it's being used for calculations.
yeah, exactly.
Which the AI model is not very good at. It's not very good at calculating things. But what it can do is that it can write SQL code
Very good.
to
Yeah.
have SQL calculate it for us,
Exactly.
which is an important distinction. And as you said, it's a big performance boost instead of using all of the OData entities.
Yeah, exactly. And from what I understand, it's going to still rely on what we mentioned before, which is kind of the key benefit here, that we already have a lot of the metadata descriptions here in the entities as they are described. So finding the data, finding the schema, finding everything that is already in place in all the tools here. This is more of a performance enhancement to actually leverage the data from SQL and not having to do a lot of paging and so forth. So I think that can be a huge benefit. But still, it won't, hopefully at least, we'll have to try it out. It won't go bananas and write a lot of joins on your data and thereby destroying your performance. It's just a way to boost the performance in a lot of these MCP data operations.
So the thing is that if I understand this correctly, it's still using the entities.
Exactly.
It's just not using them over OData. It's
Exactly.
using them as SQL views instead.
Yeah, which they are in essence. I mean, so
Yep,
for this to work, I'm guessing here, and that will be most likely clear, you will not be able to access all of the entities, right? It's the same with the BI entities, the ones that are pure database like views, they're mappings to the underlying tables. They don't have a lot of logic. They don't have a lot of virtual fields, because they would then require a lot of logical operations, which would decrease your performance. So, so as long as you have pure mapping entities, then you should be fine.
Yep. I would like to end off with two really short ones. The first one is that I think it was in the episode for 10.0.6 or something. It was a really long time ago, which was the last time we had a developer update for the release notes. And now we actually have one, because what Microsoft is doing is that they are deprecating the keywords client and server. So they are not going away tomorrow. They are not even going away in 10.0.48. They are going away in a year-ish or so. You will get compiler warnings when you do compilations, so nothing will break, but you should probably come around to fixing them, because otherwise you will have another problem.
Yeah, and that's especially for all of those out there who've done upgrades from AX2012 code, because they were frequently used in older versions of AX, where you could specify different tiers to run, which made sense in some regards, right? So if you've upgraded from AX2012, it makes sense to run it. So maybe another tip here is to investigate the new fancy MCP X++ capabilities that are out there, with caution, of course. But I've been trying those out lately, and they are very helpful in driving efficiency. As long as you have a very good gatekeeping and good test cycles here, they can be very helpful with answering questions about your, especially your custom code base, but also on the standard side. It's really helpful to analyze a large, and that's really what agents and models are great at, right? Analyzing a lot of code, giving you answers on your code, figuring out what is wrong with your code. So doing a simple search here, you could do it in your repo, of course, but you can also then get help with actually suggesting changes and get that fixed. So strong suggestion.
Yes, and one tiny final one, which is quite important as far as I think. Microsoft has released, or actually they've had this before, a Power Platform API reference. But nowadays, FNO is actually part of the Power Platform API reference, which means that you can actually have an API for automating stuff when it comes to the universal unified environment.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Which is really, really important.
Definitely, and that's in the end we will all be running these automated tools, right, Johan? Or through an agent, of course.
Yes, of course, always.
All right. Very good.
Yes, I think I'm done.
Yeah, me too. There were a lot of nice features in this release, and we don't have time to cover all of them. So again, I implore you to go to Learn, or go to the release planner, or go to or ask your nearest agent to do it for you. Just don't replace me in Johan's podcast with an agent, because then you won't get to hear us.
I don't know if it's better or worse, but I'm hoping it's better.
In the end, we'll see. Just everyone will just be having agents listening to our podcast and doing a summary for them, which will be quite sad, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And with that, we say goodbye for today.
Goodbye.
And hopefully we'll be back soon again.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.